You've probably heard the headlines. Intermittent fasting is everywhere. Your neighbor swears by it. A friend at the gym says it changed his life. And maybe you've wondered whether skipping meals could actually help you. Your brain, your heart, your waistline. But here's what you haven't heard. A study presented to the American Heart Association last year found that people who compressed their eating into an 8-hour window had a 91% higher risk of dying from cardiovascular disease. 91%. That's not a small number. So what's going on? Is intermittent fasting safe after 60? And if it is, which version? The answer is yes, but with a crucial caveat. There's a way to do it that works, and a way that can hurt you. And the difference comes down to something simple. How many hours you're actually fasting. Your body runs on energy, and it has two main sources: glucose from your food and fat stored in your tissues. When you eat regularly, your liver keeps a reservoir of glucose. We call it glycogen. Your brain and muscles tap this reserve throughout the day. You feel steady, you think clearly, you have energy when you need it. But when you go without food long enough, usually around 12 to 14 hours, your glycogen runs out. That's when something interesting happens. Your body flips a metabolic switch. It stops burning primarily glucose and starts burning fat instead. As your fat burns, your liver produces a special molecule called a ketone body. The main one you'll hear about is beta-hydroxybutyrate. Now here's why this matters for your brain. Ketones can cross the blood-brain barrier in a way that fat itself cannot. They're a premium fuel for your neurons. When your brain runs on ketones, several things happen. First, inflammation drops. Your brain tends to be inflamed as you age. It's a silent process, but it's real, and it accumulates. Ketones calm that down. Second, your brain produces more BDNF, that is brain-derived neurotrophic factor. You can think of BDNF as fertilizer for your neurons. It helps them grow, connect, and repair themselves. It's one of the reasons people report feeling mentally sharp during fasting periods. This isn't speculation. This is what the research shows. And for people over 60, that potential boost to brain health is significant. Let's talk about real studies on real people your age. Researchers at the National Institute on Aging looked at a group of adults in their early 60s who were insulin resistant. That is, their bodies weren't responding well to insulin, which affects a lot of us as we get older. These people followed a 5-to-2 protocol. 5 days of normal eating, 2 days of eating just 25% of their calories. After several months, something interesting happened. Their executive function improved. That's planning, decision-making, focus. Their verbal memory got better. And when researchers measured their brain age on cognitive testing, it came back 2.63 years younger than when they started. That's not a huge difference, but it's real, it's measurable. And it happened in people over 60. Another study, this one from 2021, looked at a different kind of fasting, a 14-10 protocol. That means a 10-hour eating window and a 14-hour fast. People following this protocol had a 72% lower likelihood of developing cognitive impairment. But here's the critical detail. The people who benefited most were those who included breakfast in their eating window. Breakfast, not skipping it. Now, before you think intermittent fasting is a miracle, let me show you the other side. A study published in 2023 looked at adults with an average age of 73. These were people doing more aggressive fasting, eating windows of 10 hours or less. When researchers tested their cognition using the mini-cog, a standard screening tool, the fasting group showed higher rates of impairment, not improvement, the opposite. Think about the last time you tried to function when you were hungry, tired, and dehydrated. It's not just a feeling, it's biological. A 2016 study of adults over 70 during Ramadan showed that, in the later weeks of the fast, their reaction times slowed measurably. They weren't just hungry, they were losing the cognitive processing speed they need to stay safe. So what do these studies tell us? Moderate fasting, the kind that aligns with normal sleep and meal patterns, appears to boost cognitive health in older adults. But aggressive fasting, the kind that means eating windows of 10 hours or less, seems to do the opposite. Here's where I need to be direct with you, because this is the #1 reason many doctors are cautious about intermittent fasting in older adults. That study I mentioned at the beginning, the one showing 91% higher cardiovascular mortality with an 8-hour eating window. It's real, it's recent, and it's based on data from tens of thousands of people. The American Heart Association presented the findings, and cardiologists took notice. But the story gets more nuanced. A large prospective study that followed over 10,000 adults with an average age around 70 found something interesting. There's a U-shaped curve. On one end, people eating their food within very tight windows, say 8 hours, had higher cardiovascular mortality. On the other end, people fasting for extremely long periods, more than about 12.4 hours, also had higher mortality. But in the middle, there was a sweet spot. A fasting period of about 11.5 hours showed the lowest overall mortality risk. Why does this matter? When you compress all your eating into a few hours, you're also concentrating your meals. Large meals, eaten back-to-back, create spikes in blood sugar and blood fats, what we call postprandial surges. These surges stress the inner lining of your blood vessels, and over time, that damage contributes to heart disease. Additionally, very aggressive fasting can accelerate muscle loss, and muscle is crucial for clearing glucose from your bloodstream. Lose muscle, and your blood sugar control gets worse. That feeds more cardiovascular stress. There's also a circadian component. Your blood pressure normally drops at night. That's called the nocturnal dip. It's a sign of a healthy cardiovascular system. But when fasting disrupts your meal timing and sleep, that dip can flatten, and your sympathetic nervous system, the fight-or-flight system, stays active when it should be winding down. That means higher blood pressure, more stress on your heart. The bottom line, aggressive intermittent fasting in people over 60 is associated with increased cardiovascular risk. Period. Here's something that doesn't always make the headlines. About 30% of people in their 60s and 50% of people in their 80s have sarcopenia. That's loss of muscle mass and strength. It's one of the biggest health challenges for older adults because muscle loss means falls, dependency, and loss of independence. Your muscles are maintained by something called muscle protein synthesis, your body building new muscle fibers to replace old ones. And this process requires adequate protein at each meal. Here's the catch. As you age, your muscles become more resistant to protein. A young adult can trigger muscle synthesis with about 20 grams of protein. You, at 60 or 70, need about 30 to 35 grams of protein per meal, and that protein needs to contain at least 2.8 to 3 grams of an amino acid called leucine. Now think about intermittent fasting, specifically the aggressive kind. If you eat from 12 noon to 8 p.m., that means from 8 p.m. to 12 noon the next day, 16 hours, your muscles are not getting any protein. It's 16 hours of what we call protein fasting. Your muscles are breaking down and you're not building new ones. Some people think they can make up for this by eating more during their eating window. Theoretically, that makes sense. Practically, it doesn't work. Your body can only synthesize so much muscle protein in one sitting. The excess calories you eat get stored as fat. You're not offsetting those 16 hours of protein fasting. You're just gaining weight. Bone is another concern. Research shows that continuous caloric restriction in older adults can reduce hip bone mineral density by about 0.8% per year. That doesn't sound like much until you realize it adds up. And while moderate time-restricted eating over short periods, less than 6 months, with less than 5% weight loss, seems safe for bone, the long-term effects of aggressive fasting are not well studied in people over 60. You can't build or maintain muscle and bone by skipping meals, even if you eat more in the hours that remain. Everything we have talked about so far assumes you are starting from a place of baseline health. But for millions of you, there is one more variable that changes the equation entirely: the medications you take. This is the section you need to pay close attention to. Fasting lowers your insulin level. When insulin drops, your kidneys change their behavior. They hold on to less sodium and less water. That's called natriuresis, and it means your blood volume decreases. For some people, that's fine. For someone on blood pressure medication, it can be dangerous. If you take a diuretic, whether that's furosemide, a thiazide, or any other water pill, adding fasting to that can cause serious dehydration. You become dizzy when you stand up. Your blood pressure crashes. And what happens next? Falls. And falls are the #1 preventable cause of death in people over 65. There's another medication class that's become extremely popular: GLP-1 agonists. Ozempic, Wegovy, Zepbound. Millions of people are on these drugs now. They work by slowing digestion and making you feel fuller. But when you add fasting on top of a GLP-1 agonist, something concerning happens. A study of over 42,000 people over 65 found that fainting, syncope, increased from about 8.7% to 10.2%. These are people losing consciousness. Then there are people on insulin or older sulfonylurea drugs. These medications lower your blood sugar aggressively. Combine them with fasting, and you can bottom out your glucose. Your brain can't function without glucose. Hypoglycemia causes confusion, arrhythmias, irregular heartbeats, and yes, falls. Sometimes it's fatal. If you're on any of these medications, and many of you are, you cannot safely do intermittent fasting without medical supervision. This is not optional. This is not something to try on your own. Let me be clear about what the science actually supports for people over 60. The 12-12 protocol, highly recommended. This is the simplest version, and it's probably closest to how many of you already live. You eat during a 12-hour window, say 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., and you fast for 12 hours, from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. That means you're asleep for most of your fast. You wake up, you eat breakfast, you have lunch and dinner, and then you eat nothing after 7 p.m. This protocol aligns with your natural sleep cycle, still gives your body time to flip the metabolic switch and produce ketones, allows 3 meals a day so you can hit your protein targets, 30 to 35 grams at each meal, is compatible with almost every medication, is sustainable long-term. There is beauty in the simplicity of the 12-12 protocol. It's not a diet you have to suffer through, it's just a boundary. You are simply closing the kitchen at 7 p.m. It's a ritual, not a restriction. This is the one the research actually supports for older adults. This is the sweet spot. The 16-8 protocol, proceed with caution. This means eating within an 8-hour window and fasting for 16 hours. Some people do 12 p.m. to 8 p.m. or 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. If you're going to try this, you need to meet several conditions. You're robust and metabolically healthy. You have no signs of sarcopenia. You're not on medications that interact with fasting. You can reliably get 30+ grams of protein at each of your 2 meals. You're drinking enough water to stay hydrated. You're doing this under medical supervision. For most people over 60, this protocol is riskier than it's worth. The cardiovascular data starts to shift into the danger zone. The muscle loss becomes real. And if you have any medication interactions, you're in trouble. The 20-4 protocol, alternate day fasting or extended fasts, not recommended. This is the aggressive stuff. Eating only once a day, or fasting every other day, or 24-hour fasts. The research does not support this in people over 60. These protocols are associated with the cardiovascular mortality increases I mentioned earlier, with significant muscle loss and with increased medication interactions. Some younger people can handle them. You probably shouldn't. Here's what I want you to take away from this. Intermittent fasting works. The research shows that moderate fasting can boost your brain function, help with metabolic health, and even help with weight loss if that's a goal. But it only works if you do it right. And doing it right after 60 is different than doing it right at 35. The good news is that the right protocol, 12-12, is probably already close to how many of you live. You go to bed at 10 p.m., you wake up and eat breakfast at 7 a.m. Congratulations, you're already intermittent fasting. The difference is being intentional about it and consistent. Not eating late-night snacks, not grazing in the evening. Making sure that when you do eat, you're hitting your protein targets. Before you flip the switch on your eating window, take this script to your doctor. Tell them you want to optimize your metabolic health without compromising your muscle mass or medication safety. Let that conversation be your first step toward a protocol that actually serves your longevity. And remember, the goal isn't to be extreme, it's to be consistent, intentional, and smart. That's how science translates into real benefits for your health.